everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah. This is my granny era. Today I am giving you 10 recommendations for books that you can read during People April. People April is an event that takes place every April. And during this reading event, we read books about people, biographies, memoirs, anything that just talks about people, right? And so I have 10 books here that I have read and enjoyed that I want to share with you guys to give you some ideas for what you could be reading during People April. All right, number 1, this is Empty Mansions by Bill Dedman and Paul Clark Newell Jr. This is the story of Huguette Clark. This is such a fantastic story and crazy too. So I remember when this first came out on the news and then shortly after they have written this book. But this woman, Huguette Clark, she lived during the golden age of America and she was a very wealthy woman. Her family were like New York elite. So very early in her life, she just sort of sequestered herself away and then it got worse and worse and worse to pretty soon. Not very many people even really remembered that she was around. She died in 2005, somewhere in there, the early 2000s, and ended up leaving her like $30 million fortune to her nursemaid. Of course, her family started fighting it, and I don't actually know what happened with that because I think this book was written during the time that it was still all up in court, but the story starts way back, maybe like her grandparents' generation, and talks about how this family was, you know, one of the prominent families and the beautiful mansions that they owned and all the stuff that they did. And if you love that era, that Gilded Age era, you know, mid 1800s and into the early 1900s in America, when, you know, technology and industry and everything was booming and all of these people were, you know, building all this crazy stuff and doing all these crazy socialite sort of things, you will probably really love this book. There are color photographs, there are all kinds of black and white illustrations and advertisements and charts and all kinds of cool stuff. It is a thick book, packed out, very interesting stuff. It will keep your attention for sure. The story of Huguette Clark is super weird. And when it was revealed that she had died and you know, her face like, oh yeah, we sort of forgot about her. So like 20 years before her death, she moved into like a nursing home sort of thing. She just left her apartment as it was, continued to pay for it. Nobody ever went back in, I guess. But she didn't like sell it. She didn't sell her stuff. She didn't leave anything. This is what they found. This is what her apartment looked like. So nobody knows why she spent 20 years in this hospital when she had all of this money, because she was in excellent health. And anyway, here's the picture of the woman who ended up getting $31 million plus money in her will. Like she had already given this money to the woman, plus money in her will. Above that is a copy of one of the checks for $5 million that she had given this woman. But hey, the woman had stuck with her for 20 years taking care of her, right? So anyway, really interesting story. I went off on that way longer than I planned to. All right, next up is this one called 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. So Nellie Bly, I believe, was a reporter, like a journalist, and she was getting word that what was going on in the madhouses of the day, the Victorian madhouses, was not necessarily the proper care for actually mentally ill women. So it's the story of Blackwell's Lunatic Asylum in New York. It was opened in 1839. It was the very first lunatic asylum that was opened there. And in 1897, this woman, Nellie Bly, she actually snuck in. She appeared as a madwoman and was admitted into the hospital. And she basically did undercover journalism work there to expose the fact that there are women here who are just fine. They're just not wanted by their families. So in addition to the fact that there was many women there who were just shoved away, she also exposed the harsh treatments that the women there underwent. So this is her account of her infiltration in actually 1887. I said 97, there's a typo at the back of the book, but It actually happened in 1887. So if you're interested, look for this one. It's a very interesting read, and it will take you on some rabbit trails. You'll probably find some more things that you want to read in that vein. All right, next up is One Writer's Beginnings by Eudora Welty. Now, I don't even know how I came across this. I had no idea who Eudora Welty was when I came across this book, but she writes short stories, and this is a collection of stories about her own childhood. This book is kind of special to me because I read this while my husband was actually at the hospital with his father who was passing away. We had made a trip out to Oregon, and I stayed in the hotel, in a really fancy Victorian hotel that has been renovated, but renovated to look like it did back in the day in our hometown. And I stayed up in one of the rooms up there and read this book during the day while my husband went and spent time with his father. And in here I have a quote actually from her that I thought was so good. And so I wrote it down here. This is the Geyser Grand Hotel letterhead from Baker City, Oregon. My husband and I both worked there as teenagers. Probably everybody in my high school worked there at one point. Anyway, it says, "Emotions do not grow old." And I thought that was sweet, especially, for the reason that we were there for Leo in his last days. Emotions do not grow old. So anyway, I wrote that down and tucked it into this book. But if you would like some interesting, fun, well-written short stories about someone's life, Eudora Welty, pick up her books. She's got quite a few books of just little snippets of her life. All right, next up, this is Mark Twain in Hawaii. This is his story of his time in Hawaii in 1872. He, I think, was writing this for the newspaper, these different things. He was like kind of correspondence writing things back, and then he put this together, Tales of the Pacific. It's Roughing It in the Sandwich Islands, Hawaii in the 1860s. So if you can get past the colonial mindset and some of the language he uses, it's actually a really interesting account of Hawaii. There were so many things in this that just really stuck out to me. So of course we were going to get a lot of their original, the natives' original practices and things that they did, which was so interesting. I did find that his humor reminded me a lot of my dad. Long ago, I had decided to dislike Mark Twain because of his comments about Jane Austen, but after reading some of Jane Austen's letters this past a couple months ago, I was like, maybe I should give Mark Twain another chance, because I don't have such a high thinking about Jane Austen as I did before either. So we all have our faults. And actually, I was going to warn you guys, like, if you're going to do this whole People April thing, I would be very careful, because sometimes you find out things about your heroes that you just didn't want to know. So be careful who you read about. So anyway, this is a short, fun read on Mark Twain's trip to Hawaii. Next up is called Memoirs of a Medieval Woman. This is the story of Marjorie Kemp. This book was put together by Louise Collis. A lot of this is actually Marjorie's narration to a bishop, a priest, like some religious leader of the time. But this is a woman who lived during medieval times. She was a mother of 14 children. She left her husband and children and decided to take a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And she is a character for sure. Her husband does accompany her for a little bit. She is horrible to him. And she's just done. She is a woman who is done. Now, I would just like to say that as a mother of 9 children, I put my 2 youngest to bed right after dinner today because I was so done. And if they don't get their act together, I might just make myself a pilgrimage as well. But anyway, you'll probably really enjoy that story, and it fits in really good for Historathon Quarter 2. If you are participating, look for Memoirs of a Medieval Woman. Marjorie Kemp's story. All right, next up, The Englishman Who Posted Himself. I've talked about this a little bit in the past, by John Tingey. And this guy, he basically was really into, like postal stuff. This whole story with this guy started when England came out with like a new set of postal regulations. Okay, so the post was kind of all over the place, and how much stuff cost and whatever, all over the place. And they wanted to regulate it all, make it an easier system. You get the gist. So he got a hold of like the book of regulations and was reading through it. And he got this idea, gee, I wonder what I could get away with posting through the mail. So he starts posting weird stuff, right? Like, I don't remember what all he posted, but say it was like, an orange, and then he posted like a beach ball, and then he posted like a hammer or whatever, but without a box or anything, just with the label on it, to see if the postal service would deliver it. And they did. So then he started posting like even weirder things like, raw food or his dog. And eventually he posted himself. And sure enough, he paid the price for the postman to walk him up to his father's door and deliver him to his father, which they both thought, I guess, was completely hilarious. I personally think that's a waste of the postman's time, but if they all thought it was funny, then whatever. So after he got done with that little project, he decided to start collecting autographs. He wanted to collect autographs from people all over the world, and he ended up getting like 30,000 or something. And what he would do was he would send a postcard to them and then ask them to autograph it and send it back to him. And sometimes it would be things like, for instance, there was one postcard, it was a tourist postcard of a rock like on the coast, Devon or something. And so on the postcard he wrote, "Please deliver this postcard to the person who lives nearest this rock." And so the postman delivered it to the person who lived nearest that rock. And then he, on the postcard, asked the resident to please sign the postcard and send it back to him, which he did. So just things like that. He started getting autographs from famous celebrities, lots of people from the US, and he had this massive postcard collection, and I can't remember exactly what happened to it, but it talks a little bit about that here in the story and how you can even help to find some of the postcard collection that has been dispersed over the years. So it was a super fun read. It has a lot of photographs in it, and so it is a quick read. I mean, it's almost more like a scrapbook. There's a lot of pages that are like that with just a caption. So it's a quick read through, but so interesting. If you have any interest in the Postal Service whatsoever, I would recommend you look for this book. Next up is Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. I read this last year, 2023, I think I read it. And I'm just going to also show this next one in line, which is the narrative of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. And both of these are autobiographical books about men who were in slavery. I think it would be great to read these together, right? Like one and then the next. Read them back to back, or at least fairly close together, because they give different perspectives on how the former slaves reacted to being freed, having to free themselves in some cases, what they did afterwards, the different hardships they faced, their own mentalities about it. Booker T. Washington got a lot of flack for his forgiveness toward his former enslavers, where Frederick Douglass, not so much. So they're both really great reads, both highly respectable men. They're a couple of my heroes, and I just thought these were fantastic reads. So look for those if you're interested. This is Shakespeare's Sisters by Rami Targoff. This book tells the story of, I think there's 4 women in here from, Queen Elizabeth's time, like 16th century women who wrote quite a bit, what they wrote, what they did with what they wrote as far as publishing, or as far as, if it's available now and that kind of stuff. And it basically argues the Virginia Woolf Room of Her Own point that if Shakespeare had a sister, then blah, 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 blah. And she was basically making the case that there wasn't any old-timey writers right in this day. And so this woman is kind of like hoping to debunk that, which she does really well. Actually, I would say there's 5 people figured in this story, because it also talks about Queen Elizabeth I herself and her writing and, distribution of her writings and that kind of thing. Number 9 is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. She was a woman who lived during the time of the Holocaust. She hid people away and helped them to escape, helped them to move along, and then eventually she was captured and put into a concentration camp herself. I believe her sister as well. I can't remember who all from her family was put in. And then not all of them made it, but Corrie ten Boom did make it, and she ended up moving to the US and lived out into her elderly years here with all kinds of ministry work and philanthropy and things. And so this tells the story up until the time that they're in the concentration camp, maybe just right after, but not much after. So this is a fantastic story about Corrie ten Boom. And then she also has a book that follows it up called Tramp for the Lord, which is actually on my list for this month for People April. So I'll be able to add that into a video next year. All right, and then last is a book I just finished. This is St. Patrick of Ireland by Philip Freeman. This is the story of Patrick, the missionary to Ireland. Tells about his kidnapping as a child and everything that he went through to get to the place where he was. He ended up going back to England and then decided, I want to go back and minister to the people that kidnapped me. And so he spent the good majority of the rest of his life ministering to the people of Ireland and growing Christianity there, training other, religious leaders and things. But this book talks about a lot more than just him and his missionary work. It talks about the history of Ireland, the history of religion in Ireland, Christianity, paganism, and other stuff. It talks a lot about women, about druids. It talks about all kinds of things that have to do with Ireland of that time and how Patrick and his life and legend has shaped it, and the things that we think about Patrick and Ireland today, especially if you are from America and don't know a whole heck of a lot about Ireland, talks a little bit about debunks the myths and gives evidence for the truths. So I thought this was a really great read. I'm glad that I read it. It's a lot is packed into this little book. So Philip Freeman's St. Patrick of Ireland. All right, so there are 10 book recommendations for People April. Let me know in the comments if any of those sound good to you. Have you read any of them, or any of them just happen to be on your TBR for this month? Let me know what you think, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.